Before we dive into the story of one of Japan's most legendary figures, let me ask you, when you think of ninjas, what comes to mind? Stealthy assassins lurking in the shadows, slipping through the cracks unseen? Or perhaps you picture them as silent warriors, bound by honor and loyalty, moving with precision and purpose in service to a greater cause. Maybe you envision them as mysterious figures with an almost supernatural ability to disappear into the night, or as cunning strategists who never fight without thinking 5 steps ahead. Take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to know what you imagine when you think of these iconic warriors and how you picture them moving through the dangerous world of feudal Japan. Were they simply merciless killers, or were they more than that, secret protectors, loyal spies, or even guardians of a future yet to come? Now, as you ponder that, let's journey back in time all the way to the 16th century, during Japan's most tumultuous era, when the fate of an entire nation rested not just on the strength of its warriors, but on those who could move unseen, those who knew how to control the shadows. Let's explore a world where loyalty was tested, alliances were fragile, and the smallest whisper or gesture could tip the scales of history. This is where our story begins, with one man, a man whose name would become synonymous with both fear and reverence, a man who moved through the darkness like no other, Hattori Hanzō. Imagine a time when the very land beneath your feet is torn asunder by relentless strife, where each dawn heralds the clash of blades, and the fate of an entire nation is held in the hands of those whose ambition fuels the fires of war. This was the Sengoku period, a dark and turbulent epoch in Japan's history, known as the Age of Warring States. For over a century, samurai, warlords, and armies clashed upon blood-soaked battlefields, each vying for supremacy, power, and the undying desire to shape the future of Japan. Honor and violence were entwined in every stroke of the sword, and allegiances, as fickle as the winds, changed with alarming swiftness. It was an age when survival was paramount, and only the most astute, ruthless, and resolute could carve a place for themselves in the annals of history. Amidst the ceaseless chaos of this fractured world, there existed a shadowy order of warriors, masters of secrecy, stealth, and subterfuge. The ninja, silent as the wind, these assassins and spies moved unseen through the night, executing covert missions that would alter the course of history. Their influence extended beyond the battlefield. It reached into the very heart of political power, where a whisper could turn the tides of fortune. These figures, elusive and enigmatic, held sway over the fate of empires. And in the midst of this tumult, one name gleamed as a paragon of unyielding loyalty, unparalleled skill, and remarkable cunning: Hattori Hanzō. Before we embark further on the remarkable journey of this legendary figure, I ask you to take a moment to like this video if you are eager to delve into the extraordinary life of one of Japan's most revered warriors. Share this video with fellow history enthusiasts and those who appreciate tales of legendary figures, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the unfolding chapters of this epic narrative. But before we proceed, tell us in the comments, had you ever encountered the name Hattori Hanzō before today? Or is this your first introduction to his extraordinary story? We'd be delighted to hear your thoughts. Hattori Hanzō was born in 1542 inches, the Iga province, a rugged and remote land, steeped in the ancient traditions of ninja clans. Iga was not merely a place. It was a crucible where the deadliest and most elusive of warriors were forged. In this land, Young boys were trained not only in the art of combat, but in the finer, more secretive arts of stealth, espionage, and deception. From an early age, Hanzō was immersed in this world of shadows, where silence was a weapon, and unseen movements were more deadly than the sharpest sword. Yet, what truly set Hanzō apart from his peers was not just his extraordinary martial skills, nor his ability to melt into the night like a shadow, but his unparalleled intellect. Hanzō was a tactician of the highest order, a master of strategy, whose mind was as sharp as the blade he wielded. He understood the delicate interplay of loyalty, power, and survival, and it was this exceptional understanding that would shape his destiny. While many of his contemporaries focused on the art of war, Hanzō saw that the true battle was fought not only with swords, but with minds, with alliances, and with information. This insight would elevate him beyond the rank of mere warrior and into the realm of legend. Brew. As the fires of war raged on, and the samurai warlords waged their ceaseless campaign for control of Japan, Hanzō's talents did not go unnoticed. His loyalty, combined with his keen intellect and remarkable prowess, drew the attention of the most powerful men in Japan, men whose names would become synonymous with the unification of the nation. Among these figures were Oda Nobunaga, the ambitious and daring warlord, whose dreams of dominion knew no bounds, and Tokugawa Ieyasu, the calculated and patient strategist who would ultimately secure his place as the first shogun of the Tokugawa shogunate. These two men would come to rely on Hanzō, not only for his prowess in combat, but for his ability to navigate the treacherous waters of war and politics. And, as the tide of the Sengoku period surged onward, Hanzō's role in the grand narrative of Japan's unification became more and more critical. Though he was known for his martial prowess, his greatest contributions were often made in the shadows. He was not merely a warrior, he was a strategist, a counselor, and a protector. His missions were often the unseen threads that wove the fabric of victory, his intelligence the key to turning the tide in favor of his lord. Whether executing covert operations, gathering vital intelligence, or sabotaging enemy lines, Hanzō's actions often determined the outcome of battles and, ultimately, the fate of Japan itself. But it was not until the fall of Oda Nobunaga, at the hands of his own general Akechi Mitsuhide, that Hanzō's loyalty and resolve were truly tested. In 1582, the betrayal of Nobunaga led to a bloody turning point, and the death of the great warlord threatened to unravel all that he had built. In the face of this treachery, where many would have faltered, Hanzō remained resolute. He pledged his undying loyalty to Tokugawa Ieyasu, who stood to inherit the mantle of Nobunaga's legacy. This loyalty would prove crucial in Ieyasu's own rise to power, and Hanzō's actions in the wake of Nobunaga's death would help shape the destiny of the entire nation. The transition from serving Nobunaga to Ieyasu was a pivotal moment in Hanzō's life. As Ieyasu's trusted ally, Hanzō became a linchpin in the Tokugawa cause. His loyalty and cunning would serve him well in the coming years, as he played a decisive role in the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600, a battle that would determine the future of Japan. Ieyasu's victory at Sekigahara would lay the groundwork for the establishment of the Tokugawa shogunate, a regime that would endure for over 250 years. And Hanzō, ever the shadowy figure behind the scenes, would forever be remembered as one of the key architects of Japan's peace and prosperity in the centuries to come. Stay with us as we continue to unravel the story of Hattori Hanzō, the man whose name became synonymous with loyalty, strategy, and the mysterious world of the ninja. This is a tale of triumph, sacrifice, and legacy. A legacy that transcends time and continues to inspire awe in the hearts of those who seek to understand the true meaning of honor, duty, and power. The legend of Hattori Hanzō endures, a testament to the enduring power of loyalty and the silent warriors who shaped the course of history. The Sengoku period was a time of unrelenting turmoil in Japan, a land torn apart by constant strife. The very fabric of society was under threat, with powerful warlords and samurai engaging in relentless warfare, each striving for dominance in the fractured kingdom. It was an age where the clash of armies echoed across the countryside, where villages were razed to the ground and castles crumbled into rubble. Political instability reigned, and the fear of betrayal hung in the air like a heavy mist, as alliances shifted with alarming unpredictability. The only truth in this chaotic world was the inevitability of war. For decades, Japan was divided into warring factions, each battling not just for territory, but for the future of the nation itself. Lords and samurai fought not only for their personal ambitions, but for an enduring vision of Japan, a vision that often clashed violently with the aspirations of others. Each battle seemed to give birth to new alliances and rivalries, while the country itself spiraled deeper into chaos. It was a brutal and unforgiving time, and survival was the only guarantee. In this world, even the most powerful figures could easily be undone by betrayal, deception, or simply the unpredictable nature of the conflict. Amid this ceaseless bloodshed and instability, many names would come to define the Sengoku period. Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and Tokugawa Ieyasu were some of the most renowned figures. But there was one name that would rise from the shadows to become a legend in his own right: Hattori Hanzō. His role in the rise of the Tokugawa shogunate and the eventual unification of Japan would become a story that would be passed down through generations. Yet, before we can delve into the tale of this remarkable man, it's vital to first understand the landscape that shaped his destiny. The world Hattori Hanzō was born into was a battlefield, an unforgiving land where blood was spilled on every inch of soil. The once thriving cities and villages were often reduced to ruins, their inhabitants either killed or displaced. The peaceful landscapes that Japan was known for were overshadowed by the constant sounds of warfare, the clang of swords, the rumble of marching armies, and the cries of those caught in the middle of conflicts. It was in this hellish world that warriors like Hanzō were born. Raised amidst the chaos, they learned that survival was not just a matter of strength, but of cunning, stealth, and an unyielding will to endure. The land itself became a reflection of the turmoil that gripped the nation. The vast countryside, dotted with mountains, forests, and rivers, was transformed into a strategic chessboard. Castles, symbols of power, stood as sentinels over the land, while samurai and warlords fought bitterly for control. The landscape was marked not only by natural beauty but by the scars of war. Battlefields littered with the bodies of fallen soldiers, charred remnants of once beautiful villages, and the smoke rising from fires that seemed to burn endlessly. The very terrain seemed to breathe with the tension of this age of conflict. In this world, survival required more than just mastery of the sword. It demanded a deep understanding of the land and the people within it. The ability to navigate both the physical and political landscapes was what set the most successful warriors apart. While some fought with brute force on the front lines, others, like Hanzō, understood the power of secrecy, intelligence, and stealth. The battlefield was not just a place of open confrontation but a realm of shadows where espionage, sabotage, and subterfuge could be just as deadly as a sword thrust. Hanzō's story began in a land where the clash of armies was a daily reality, and where the most cunning and strategic could rise to the top. He was born into the Iga region, a place known for its ninja traditions, where espionage and covert operations were not just a way of life, but a form of art. It was here, in the shadow of war, that Hanzō would hone the skills that would make him one of the most feared and respected figures of his time. But before he became the legendary ninja who would serve under Oda Nobunaga and later Tokugawa Ieyasu, Hanzō's path was shaped by the very land he called home, the land of endless conflict, where every day was a fight for survival. Understanding this world, the fierce competition between warlords, and the constant shifting of allegiances is crucial to understanding how a young boy from the Iga region could rise to such prominence. As the Sengoku period continued to unfold, it would be warriors like Hanzō, men who had been forged in the fire of battle, who had learned to move unseen through the political chaos of the time, who would ultimately shape Japan's future. Yet, even as peace began to take shape under the leadership of Tokugawa Ieyasu, the scars of the Sengoku period would remain, and the shadows of war would never fully disappear. For men like Hanzō, the legacy of those turbulent years would never be forgotten, and their stories would continue to echo through the centuries, a testament to the price of unification and the power of those who mastered the art of survival. In this turbulent world, where only the strong survived, Hattori Hanzō would carve his name into history, becoming a symbol of loyalty, stealth, and unwavering resolve. But to understand his legacy, one must first understand the world that created him, an unforgiving battlefield where war was the only constant and survival was the ultimate prize. This was the landscape of the Sengoku period, the world in which Hattori Hanzō would rise from the shadows of conflict to become one of Japan's most legendary figures. Hattori Hanzō's roots were deeply entrenched in the Iga region, a place renowned throughout Japan for producing the most skilled and elusive ninja. Located in the rugged hills and dense forests of central Japan, Iga was a land shaped by its very environment, a wilderness where secrecy and stealth were not only practical skills but necessary survival tools. The thick forests and towering mountains created a natural labyrinth, an ideal training ground for those who lived in the shadows, away from the prying eyes of the world. The people of Iga were bound by traditions of secrecy, espionage, and covert warfare. It was here, amidst these secluded hills, that the art of the ninja was passed down through generations. Ninja were more than just spies or assassins. They were masters of concealment, able to disappear into the landscape, infiltrate their enemies' strongholds, and return with invaluable information, all while remaining undetected. In Iga, the line between samurai and ninja was often blurred. Both fought with honor, but while the samurai faced their enemies head-on in battle, the ninja struck from the shadows, relying on skill, intelligence, and deception. Survival in Iga was dependent on one's ability to move undetected, not only from external threats, but also from the treachery that could emerge from within. The terrain itself was a labyrinth of narrow paths, winding through dense forests and deep ravines. The thick canopy of trees formed a near-permanent shadow, making it difficult to spot any sign of movement. The land was quiet, still, and isolating, where every rustling leaf or snapping twig could mean life or death. In this environment, Hanzō would have been raised, learning to read the land like an open book, recognizing every subtle change in the environment, and understanding the value of absolute silence. Here, even the smallest of movements, a shift in position, a broken branch, a footstep could betray one's presence. Such was the danger of the world in which Hanzō was trained. The land itself became a silent teacher, molding him into a master of stealth, espionage, and survival. From an early age, Hanzō would have been immersed in the deadly arts of the ninja. The focus was not just on physical combat, but on the subtle arts of subterfuge, how to move unseen, how to gather intelligence, and how to outwit opponents who far outnumbered you. The ninja's greatest weapon was not the sword, but the mind and ability to understand people, read situations, and turn the environment itself into an ally. Through rigorous training, Hanzō would have mastered the techniques that allowed him to blend into the landscape, to become a ghost in the forest, and to strike without warning. It was a life of discipline, where every step, every gesture, was calculated for the utmost precision. Yet, even as he honed his skills in the quiet solitude of Iga, the world beyond its borders was vastly different. While Iga was a land of shadow and silence, the larger political landscape of Japan was a battlefield where power and ambition clashed openly. The warlords and samurai of Japan fought for control of the land, and the stakes were high. Castles towered over the landscape, monuments to the ambition of those who ruled them. Armies marched across the open plains, their banners flying high, while the sound of battle could often be heard in the distance. The land was scarred by warfare, and the skies were thick with smoke from burning villages and the aftermath of battles. For Hanzō and the men of Iga, however, this larger world was not their realm. They were not warriors in the traditional sense, standing on battlefields to face opponents head-on. Instead, the men of Iga, silent, unseen, found their true calling not in open combat but in the shadows. While samurai marched proudly across the battlefield, it was the ninja who moved in the darkness, slipping past enemy lines, gathering intelligence, and executing covert operations that could change the course of history. They were the unseen hand guiding the destiny of the samurai, ensuring that their master's ambitions would not be threatened by their rivals. The world outside Iga was a realm of open conflict, a stage set for grand battles and the clashing of swords. But for Hanzō and others like him, the true fight was in the shadows. The battlefield was not a place for the ninja. They were not there to fight with brute strength, but to observe, gather, and manipulate. The ultimate goal was not victory in battle, but victory in war, shaping the outcome of the conflict through intelligence and strategy, never revealed, always hidden. In the tranquil yet dangerous landscape of Iga, Hattori Hanzō was being shaped not just into a man of action but into a master of subterfuge, a ninja who would one day move between the realms of samurai and shadow, his actions felt but never seen. The land that created him was a place of mystery and danger, where survival depended on one's ability to remain hidden, unseen, and unnoticed. And in this environment, Hanzō's legend would begin, as he learned to become a force in the shadows, an art that would carry him through the tumult of the Sengoku period and into the history of Japan. Outside the quiet, shadowed forests of Iga, the rest of Japan was a land ravaged by fire and blood. The Sengoku period, an era of intense warfare, swept across the country, and the once unified nation had splintered into a series of feudal territories, each ruled by ambitious warlords. In this chaotic world, several powerful figures began to rise, each determined to unify Japan under their banner. Among them, two names would come to define the future of the nation: Oda Nobunaga and Tokugawa Ieyasu. These men, driven by extraordinary ambition, would forever alter the course of history. As Japan was plunged deeper into conflict, the very landscape transformed into a sprawling network of battlefields. The land itself seemed to be in constant turmoil, where warlords and their armies clashed violently over control of territory. Castles, majestic symbols of power, stood like chess pieces across the land, each one a strategically important fortress that could tip the balance of power. Some castles were grand, looming over the landscape, while others were smaller and more humble, but each one served as a critical point in the intricate game of domination and survival. With each castle and fortification came alliances and betrayals, victories and defeats, every inch of land fought over as if it were the last. In this war-torn world, the air was thick with the smell of smoke from burning villages and the cries of soldiers locked in battle. The clanging of swords, the thunderous charge of cavalry, and the cries of warriors echoing across the fields created a symphony of destruction. The samurai, adorned in gleaming armor, fought valiantly on the open battlefield, charging forward with the honor and valor that defined their way of life. They were the visible force of the war, brave and proud, fighting for their lords and their vision of Japan's future. But for the ninja, the battle was not fought in the open. They were the unseen force, the shadows that moved where the samurai could not. While the samurai clashed on the front lines, it was the ninja who slipped through the cracks of the battlefield, operating behind enemy lines. Their weapons, silent, deadly, and swift, were as effective as any blade. The ninja's true strength lay not in direct combat, but in espionage, sabotage, and gathering intelligence. They operated in the shadows, watching, listening, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. For Hanzō, a man trained in the arts of stealth and subterfuge, this broader landscape of war was where his true abilities came to the forefront. The samurai fought their battles with honor and pride, but it was the ninja who shaped the outcome of these conflicts in ways that were often unseen. With the ability to infiltrate enemy camps, gather critical information, and sabotage vital supplies, the ninja played a crucial role in determining the fate of the warring factions. Their work was often hidden, but without it, victory would have been far more elusive. The landscape of war during the Sengoku period was a vast, sprawling web of shifting alliances, betrayals, and constantly changing loyalties. The battlefields were not confined to the open plains where samurai fought. They stretched into the shadows, where espionage and intelligence gathering became just as crucial as martial prowess. For Hanzō and his fellow ninjas, the war was not won solely through force, but through cunning, strategy, and the ability to move unseen. They were the ones who pulled the strings from the shadows, influencing the course of history without ever stepping into the spotlight. In this turbulent and ever-shifting world, the ninja were the ultimate masters of adaptability. While the samurai charged ahead with swords drawn, the ninja stayed hidden, watching, and waiting for the perfect moment to act. Whether it was undermining a rival's resources, ensuring the safety of their own forces, or striking fear into the hearts of their enemies, the ninja were an indispensable force in the larger war effort. Their actions were quiet, their motives hidden, but their impact was undeniable. The warlords and samurai who rose to power understood that victory in the Sengoku period was as much about who moved in the shadows as it was about who stood on the battlefield. For Hanzō, a figure who had been shaped by the land of Iga, this broader landscape was not foreign. It was an environment he had been trained for from an early age, a place where the most powerful warriors were those who could navigate the chaos of war from the safety of the shadows. In this world of conflict, he was not just a soldier or a warrior. He was a strategist, a master of espionage, and a force that operated where others could not see. As Japan's future hung in the balance, it was men like Hanzō, skilled in the subtle art of war, who helped tip the scales, guiding the nation towards its destiny from behind the veil of secrecy. What set Japan apart during the Sengoku period was the duality of its landscape, a land of contrasts, where beauty and destruction coexisted in an uneasy balance. On one side, the land was lush and serene rolling hills that stretched to the horizon, dense forests with towering trees, and peaceful villages nestled in valleys that seemed untouched by time. The natural world was vibrant, offering shelter and sustenance, with rivers flowing through the land and fields ripe for harvest. This was the Japan that many dreamed of, a tranquil haven where life could be simple and abundant. But beneath this beauty lay a darker reality. The very same land that provided nourishment and solace was also capable of hiding death and destruction. Every hill, while appearing harmless, could conceal the troops of a warlord waiting to march into battle. Every village, so peaceful in the quiet of the morning, could be razed by nightfall, destroyed in an act of conquest or revenge. The land was scarred by the constant churn of war, where the peaceful serenity of nature could erupt into violence at any moment. This contrast, the calm and the violent, was not only a physical feature of the land, but a reflection of the very essence of Japan during the Sengoku period. For Hanzō, this duality was an ever-present reality. The landscape was both a sanctuary and a proving ground. Growing up in Iga, a region known for its ninja traditions, he learned to move through the land like a shadow, understanding its every curve and contour. The dense forests and hidden caves that once provided refuge became his training grounds, places where survival depended on knowledge of the land. He learned to recognize the subtle differences in the environment, the rustling of the leaves when a breeze passed through the trees, the sound of footsteps that didn't belong, and the hidden pathways that could offer an escape or a surprise attack. Survival in this world required more than just physical skill. It demanded an intimate understanding of the land itself. The natural world was as much an ally as it was a challenge. For Hanzō, it was not enough to be skilled in combat or stealth. He had to be able to blend into his surroundings, to disappear when the need arose, and to strike with precision when the moment called for it. The forest, with its silent paths and hidden caves, became his second skin. In the same way that a samurai might rely on the strength of his sword, a ninja like Hanzō relied on the power of the land, its silence, its shadows, its ability to conceal. But the land's dual nature was not lost on him. For all its beauty, the landscape of Japan was a constant reminder of the fragility of peace. The calm that often settled over the land could be shattered in an instant, as armies clashed and villages were burned to the ground. In this world of violence and constant upheaval, peace was a fleeting illusion, something to be guarded carefully, for it could dissolve into chaos at any moment. And for Hanzō, who had grown up in a land where war could break out without warning, this lesson was deeply ingrained. Even in times of supposed peace, the shadows of war were never far behind. The land itself, both tranquil and treacherous, served as a constant teacher for Hanzō. It shaped his understanding of the world, his perception of danger, and his strategy in times of conflict. The natural beauty of Japan's forests, hills, and valleys offered moments of peace, but they also held the potential for hidden danger. The warriors of this age, like Hanzō, knew that the same land that nurtured life could also become a battleground. It was a place where survival was defined not only by one's skill in combat, but also by one's ability to read the signs of the land, to understand when danger was near, and to act swiftly before the land turned against you. This duality, peace and war, beauty and destruction, was a lesson that would remain with Hanzō throughout his life. As a man who straddled the worlds of the samurai and the ninja, he understood that the world was never fully at peace. Even in the moments of calm, the ever-present possibility of violence and betrayal lingered in the shadows. In a world where the landscape could change from tranquil beauty to a blood-soaked battlefield in the blink of an eye, survival depended on knowing when to hide and when to fight, when to move quietly through the trees, and when to draw your sword. The world was full of contradictions, but it was in understanding these contradictions that Hanzō would find his strength. In this world of perpetual conflict, there was no true safety. Peace was a rare gift, fragile and fleeting, and it was always threatened by the forces of ambition, betrayal, and war. And yet, for someone like Hanzō, who had been shaped by this land of beauty and brutality, it was the very nature of this instability that gave rise to his legendary skill. It was the land itself, with its dual nature, that helped shape him into the ninja who would go on to influence the course of history. Hanzō's skill lay not just in his ability to fight, but in his ability to navigate this ever-changing landscape. As a samurai and a ninja, he had to understand both the political terrain and the physical one. His time on the battlefield had taught him how to survive amidst chaos. But it was his expertise in espionage and intelligence that truly made him invaluable. His ability to gather information and make quick decisions in the face of shifting allegiances was unmatched. In his early years, Hanzō learned how to move through the terrain without leaving a trace. He understood the rhythms of the land, the hidden places where a man could rest or plan without being seen. His life as a ninja was one of constant adaptation, moving swiftly, silently, and always thinking several steps ahead. But even as the political landscape of Japan shifted with the rise of Oda Nobunaga and Tokugawa Ieyasu, the skills that Hanzō honed in the forests of Iga remained the same: observation, patience, and the ability to strike when the time was right. The landscape of war in Japan during the Sengoku period was a crucible, a place where the warriors of the time were forged. It was a land that shaped the destiny of men like Hanzō, who understood that survival depended on more than just strength. It depended on understanding the terrain, both physical and political, and knowing when to fight and when to remain hidden. The forests of Iga and the battlefields of Japan were not just backdrops for Hanzō's story. They were the very elements that shaped him. As a ninja, he was both a product of his environment and a master of it, able to navigate the shifting landscape of war with deadly precision. And as the Sengoku period drew to a close, the land itself would remember the names of those who shaped its future, none more so than Hattori Hanzō, the shadow who had helped turn the tide of history. Hattori Hanzō was born into a world that straddled the line between myth and reality, in the remote, mountainous region of Iga. The Iga province, nestled in the rugged hills and dense forests of central Japan, was a place steeped in both natural beauty and lethal secrets. This land, so serene and picturesque, was also the birthplace of the ninja stealthy warriors, who were as much a part of the shadows as they were of the land itself. The towering trees whispered ancient songs on the wind, their branches swaying with the weight of untold stories, as if the very earth itself kept its secrets in the roots of the soil. The air was thick, yet still, a quiet tension hanging like a fog over the landscape, almost as if nature itself sensed the darker undertones of the world around it. In the distance, the faint cry of a hawk echoed through the silent valley, a sound both haunting and beautiful. The world of Iga, lush and vibrant, seemed to pulse with life, but beneath its calm surface, there was always the murmur of war. In this world of contrast, where beauty and danger coexisted side by side, Hanzō's family was deeply entwined with the traditions of Iga. The Hattori clan, a name synonymous with both honor and secrecy, had long been masters of the art of ninjutsu. Though outwardly a noble family, they had lived for centuries in the shadows, hidden behind the veils of secrecy and subtlety. They had come to understand that in the world of shadows, nothing was ever as it seemed. Their loyalty was their greatest strength, their skills in espionage their most valuable asset. From the very beginning, Hanzō was immersed in this world of quiet intensity. His family was not only skilled in combat, but had mastered the art of remaining unseen, of slipping through the cracks in the world without ever leaving a mark. In the quiet of the Iga Mountains, where the forests stretched endlessly and the rivers ran like veins through the land, Hanzō's early lessons were ones of patience and perception. His parents, both seasoned in the ancient arts of the ninja, knew that survival in a world like theirs required more than just strength or skill with a sword. It required an understanding of the world around you, a deep awareness of every leaf that fluttered in the wind and every shadow that passed across the path. And so, from an early age, Hanzō was taught to move like the wind quietly, unnoticed, yet powerful in its ability to change the world around it. His parents would take him to the highest cliffs, where the clouds hovered like a veil over the world below, and they would teach him to listen not just to the sound of the wind, but to the world itself. They would recite old poems of the land, verse by verse, with words that spoke of nature's delicate beauty, yet carried the weight of years of struggle and warfare. In the shadow of the mountain, where silence becomes a prayer, the wind whispers of battles and of warriors who are no longer there. In the serenity of the Iga forests, where time seemed to slow, these words echoed softly, lingering in the cool air. And yet, beneath their calm, there was always an undercurrent of tension, a reminder that in the world of the ninja, peace was always fragile. The quiet moments, like the brief stillness of the morning before the storm, were filled with the heavy weight of impending conflict. The land itself seemed to breathe in the space between moments, its beauty hiding the turmoil that often lay just beneath the surface. The tall, dark trees of Iga were both a sanctuary and a prison. The same forests that offered Hanzō the space to learn and grow also hid the secrets of the land of men who walked the earth as shadows, leaving no trace of their passing. The paths through the forest were narrow and winding, often disappearing into the unknown, much like the lives of those who walked them. Each corner of the land, from the mist-shrouded rivers to the quiet hills, was steeped in stories of those who had come before, their struggles and their sacrifices. The faintest rustle of leaves, or the sudden cry of a bird could mean either peace or danger, for in the world of Iga, there was no true calm, only the stillness before a storm. As Hanzō grew, his training deepened. He learned not only to move through the forest with the grace of a shadow, but to understand the deeper meanings of his surroundings. The land of Iga, so full of life, also spoke of death, of battles fought and lost, of the quiet lives lived in the wake of war. His parents taught him to read the world not just with his eyes, but with his senses, to feel the pulse of the earth, to understand the subtle changes in the air, the shift in the wind, the distant echoes that told of threats or opportunities. Survival here was not just about combat, it was about understanding that the world around you could change in an instant, and to be ready when it did. And so, in this land of contradictions where beauty was as fleeting as life itself, Hanzō learned the first lessons of his life. These were not just lessons in combat, but in survival, in understanding that in a world where peace was as fragile as the wind, the ability to adapt and disappear was the greatest skill of all. He learned that the path of the ninja was not just one of darkness, it was one that required understanding the light as well. The stillness of Iga's forests, though beautiful, would come to define his life. Its beauty would stay with him, even in times of violence, and its quiet menace would be a constant reminder that peace was never more than a fleeting moment in a world built on shadows and survival. Training. The early years of Hanzō's life were marked by a relentless and grueling regimen of training, one that would test the limits of both his body and mind. In Iga, where the land itself was both beautiful and unforgiving, children were not raised to simply respect nature. They were taught to conquer it, to learn its darkest secrets, and to move through it as silently and efficiently as the wind itself. Hanzō's training was not confined to the walls of any dojo. It was spread across the forests, the rivers, the caves, and the mountains of Iga. Every day, from dawn until dusk, was spent honing skills that would one day make him a master of stealth, deception, and survival. The first lesson he learned was the art of moving silently through the dense, shadowed forests. Iga's towering trees and tangled undergrowth made even the simplest movement a challenge. From the moment he could walk, Hanzō was tasked with navigating these treacherous woods without making a sound. His feet were conditioned to move silently across leaves, twigs, and stones. He was taught to step where there was no noise, on soft patches of moss, on the smooth stones of hidden paths, and along the trunks of fallen trees. Every step he took was an exercise in restraint, requiring him to constantly focus on his movements. It was an exhausting task. Hours would be spent walking and running through the woods, his muscles aching from the strain. Yet he could not afford to make a single sound. His training involved long, silent sprints, as well as slow, calculated movements, all while being watched by his masters, who would not hesitate to correct him with a sharp reprimand or physical punishment if he failed to meet their rigorous standards. The next phase of his training involved learning to blend seamlessly with his environment. Hanzō was not merely learning to become invisible, he was being taught to become the landscape itself. This required days of solitary practice, where he would remain motionless for hours, concealed in the shadows, waiting for the natural world around him to change. He learned how to melt into his surroundings, to stand still like a tree or a rock, to blend into the fabric of nature. His masters would place him in the heart of the dense forest and order him to remain motionless for hours on end. The wind would shift, the birds would call, and the forest would continue to breathe its ancient rhythm. But Hanzō had to remain silent, still, and invisible. He would not move unless absolutely necessary, for even the smallest motion could give him away. In these moments, he learned the true meaning of patience. His body would ache, his limbs would cramp, but the lesson was clear. The world moved on without him, and if he was to survive in it, he had to learn to be a ghost within it. Another brutal part of Hanzō's training was his weaponry drills. While other warriors of his time were trained to wield swords and spears in grand, sweeping arcs, Hanzō's training was about efficiency and precision. The ninja did not strike with force alone, they struck with purpose. Hours were spent perfecting the art of throwing knives, learning how to aim with deadly accuracy from various distances and angles. He would practice in the early mornings, when the mist still clung to the ground, aiming at targets set far across a clearing, sometimes hitting them from behind cover. The throwing knives were not just tools of combat, they were instruments of deception. The precision required was grueling. Many days would pass with Hanzō's hands cut from the repeated motions, his arms trembling from the effort of throwing again and again, striving to land his weapons with perfect accuracy. Poison was another tool in a ninja's arsenal, and Hanzō's training in its use was equally demanding. He learned to craft poisons from the plants and herbs of the forest, studying the plant's properties with meticulous care. Hanzō's masters would often leave him in the wilderness, alone, for days at a time to forage for ingredients, forcing him to use both his knowledge and his survival instincts. Afterward, he would prepare various concoctions designed to incapacitate or kill. The practice was tedious and fraught with danger, as even the slightest misstep could lead to poisoning oneself. For hours, he would sit with mortar and pestle, crushing roots, mixing powders, and preparing toxins, all while maintaining an unwavering focus. His hands, often slick with the bitter residue of the plants, would become stiff and sore. Yet failure was not an option. The life of a ninja depended on knowing how to wield these poisons effectively, just as much as it did on mastering the art of the blade. Hanzō's training also included learning the subtle art of deception, the ability to mislead an enemy, to become someone else entirely. To aid in this, he was taught the art of disguise. His instructors would often change his appearance, and he would have to adapt, using makeup, clothing, and mannerisms to assume different identities. But disguise was not just about changing his outer appearance. It was about learning to become someone else in the deepest sense. The art of deception required Hanzō to think as his enemy would think, to anticipate their next move, and to remain one step ahead. For hours, he would practice disguises in front of his family and fellow ninjas, who would judge his ability to deceive and act the part convincingly. He would become a different person in each lesson, changing his voice, posture, and attitude, all while remaining within the confines of his mission. The pressure was constant, as each test demanded absolute perfection. The idea was clear. In the world of espionage, failure to deceive meant failure to survive. But perhaps the most grueling aspect of Hanzō's training came in the form of psychological preparation. A ninja was not only a warrior but a master of the mind. His masters taught him to understand people, how to read their behavior, understand their fears, and manipulate their thoughts. Every encounter with another person was a potential mission, and Hanzō was taught to observe every gesture, every subtle shift in expression, every flicker of the eyes. His training included observing his family and fellow ninjas, learning how to detect lies, manipulate conversations, and predict actions. This psychological training was exhausting in its own right, requiring endless focus and an ability to suppress his own emotions. He was trained to think not just in the present but many steps ahead, anticipating every potential outcome. The weight of such constant vigilance was immense, and at times, Hanzō felt the burden of knowing that his very survival depended on his ability to manipulate the people around him. The early years of Hanzō's training were brutal in their demands, physically, mentally, and emotionally. His body was forged through a series of strenuous exercises, pushing him to the limits of endurance. His mind was sharpened through endless hours of study, strategy, and deception. But it was in the dense, silent forests of Iga, where every step was a challenge, that Hanzō truly learned what it meant to be a ninja. The harshness of his training shaped him into a man who could move through the world as a shadow, unseen and unknown. Every day, every lesson, was another step toward mastering the art of survival in a world where trust was fleeting and danger was always lurking just beneath the surface. Influence of Iga's ninja culture. Growing up in Iga, Hanzō was immersed in a rich culture of ninja traditions. The region itself, known for its thick forests and difficult terrain, had long been the breeding ground for ninja clans who specialized in covert operations, espionage, and guerrilla warfare. The people of Iga had lived in the shadow of feudal lords for centuries, often working as mercenaries, spies, and informants. This was a land where survival was an art, where blending in with nature and understanding the unpredictable rhythms of life could make the difference between life and death. The ninja culture in Iga wasn't merely about combat, it was about adapting to a world that could change on a dime. It was about understanding that everything had a deeper meaning, that every rustle in the wind, every shift in the landscape, could be a sign of danger or opportunity. From an early age, Hanzō was trained to interpret these signs and to act quickly, knowing that the difference between success and failure often depended on being able to read a situation before it even unfolded. Iga's ninja culture also imparted a deep sense of loyalty. While many might view the ninja as mercenaries or outlaws, in Iga, their services were rendered with a deep sense of commitment to their clan, their people, and their masters. For Hanzō, this sense of duty and loyalty would become one of his defining characteristics. The lessons taught to him in his formative years in Iga were not simply about surviving in the shadows. They were about understanding that every action taken in the shadows carried weight and had consequences. The role of family in Hanzō's development. Hanzō's family played an integral and irreplaceable role in shaping not just his skills but his very essence. His parents, strong and wise, were not merely instructors in the art of the ninja, they were the guiding hands that molded his heart and mind. In the shadowed world of Iga, where every family had its own set of secrets and loyalties, the Hattori clan stood resolute, steeped in the ancient traditions of espionage, loyalty, and duty. The bond between a ninja and his family was sacred, an unspoken promise of trust, sacrifice, and honor that transcended even life and death. Hanzō's father, Hattori Yasunaga, a master of ninjutsu, was a man of few words but intense presence. His eyes, though quiet, conveyed volumes. The weight of the Hattori family's legacy rested upon his shoulders, and he instilled this sense of responsibility in his son from an early age. Every day they would train together, and though Zento was a stern teacher, there were moments fleeting but precious when he would speak softly, guiding Hanzo not just in technique but in the principles of honor that shape the very core of the ninja's life. One evening, after a long day of training, with the cool Iga wind rustling through the forest and the faint glow of the moon casting long shadows, Zento sat beside Hanzo, who was exhausted from a long day of stealth exercises. The silence between them was comfortable, as if the land itself encouraged quiet reflection. "Hanzo," Yasunaga's deep voice broke the stillness. "Do you know why we, the Hattori, serve our masters in silence? It is not because we are weak, nor because we lack pride. It is because our strength lies in our ability to remain hidden in the shadows. A ninja who shows his face is a warrior who loses his power. A ninja who shows his loyalty is a man who has already won." Hanzo looked up at his father, his eyes filled with both respect and confusion. "But father, how can we serve without being seen? How can we be truly loyal if we remain hidden?" Yasunaga turned to his son, his face softened by years of experience. To serve with loyalty does not mean to be recognized. True loyalty is a silent vow, unbroken by time or challenge. We, the shadows, act without the need for praise. Our work is never seen, but our service is eternal. The world may not know us, but those who do understand the depth of our commitment. Loyalty is not in words, Hanzo. It is in action. Yasunaga's words were heavy, and in that moment, Hanzo began to understand the weight of the path laid before him. The shadows would become his home, and in them he would walk with a quiet sense of duty. His family's words, their traditions, and their values would shape him into the ninja. He would become a servant to his masters, but also a man who understood that loyalty was a silent, invisible force that held the world together. Hanzo's mother, Hattori Chiyo, was equally instrumental in his development, but her guidance was softer, though no less important. Fuyu was a woman of deep wisdom, known for her ability to weave not only poisons and remedies, but also the delicate threads of relationships within the ninja community. While Yasunaga taught Hanzo how to survive in the shadows, Chiyo taught him how to navigate the delicate intricacies of human nature. She would often sit by the firelight, her needle working through the fabric of a garment, while Hanzo listened attentively, learning not only the physical arts but the subtle ways of reading people, of understanding their fears and desires. One night, as they sat together in the dimly lit room, Chiyo looked at Hanzo with a mixture of concern and love. She had seen in him the strength of his father, but also the soft heart that could be his greatest asset or his deepest vulnerability. "Hanzo," she said quietly, "you are strong, like your father, but you are also kind. Do not let the world harden you. The ninja's path is dark, but it does not need to erase your heart. The shadows will teach you patience, but you must remember that the people you serve are still human. Protect them, but do not lose your humanity in the process." Hanzo, still young but beginning to understand the weight of her words, nodded. He knew that his mother's lessons would serve him not just in battle, but in the quiet, invisible wars that he would fight within his own heart. Later that night, Chiyo recited a poem that had been passed down in their family for generations, one that encapsulated both the pain and the pride of a ninja's life. Beneath the moon's soft glow, where shadows hide and rivers flow, the silent step, the hidden blade, in darkness, loyalty is laid. For the unseen, a life is sworn. In shadow's embrace, we are reborn. The words echoed in the quiet room, And for Hanzō, they became a mantra, a reminder of the path he was on. His family had given him the tools to move in silence, to disappear when needed, and to strike when the time was right. But most importantly, they had shown him the weight of loyalty, the invisible thread that bound him to his masters, his people, and the very land he walked upon. For Hanzō, there was no choice but to follow in the footsteps of his ancestors. His training, the lessons from his parents, and the legacy of the Hattori clan were the foundation of everything he would become. From the earliest days of his training, he understood that the world of the ninja was one of shadows and silence. Loyalty and trust were the pillars upon which that world stood. His family, steeped in the art of secrecy, taught him that the shadows were not a place of cowardice, but a place of honor, a place where one's actions spoke louder than any words. And so, Hanzō learned that the ninja's life was not only about combat or survival, it was about duty, sacrifice, and the quiet, invisible strength that came from being part of something much larger than oneself. The shadows would be his home, and in them he would walk with his family's silent promise, the promise of loyalty, not just to his masters, but to the very ideals that defined him. The Sengoku period, a time of constant war and unrest, was reaching its boiling point. For years, Japan had been fractured into hundreds of warring factions, each vying for control. The land was torn apart by rival warlords, all seeking dominance, all driven by ambition, and each determined to carve out their piece of the nation. Amidst this chaos, a new wave of powerful leaders began to rise, the most notable of whom was Oda Nobunaga, a man whose ambitions knew no bound. His vision was not just to win a single battle or conquer a single province, but to unify all of Japan under one banner, ending the chaos once and for all. Nobunaga's rise to power was swift, brutal, and filled with ruthless efficiency. Unlike other warlords, he was not content with simply defending his own territory. He sought to expand, to challenge the status quo, and to reshape the future of Japan. He was a man of military genius, unafraid to embrace new tactics, and he surrounded himself with those who shared his vision, warriors, who would stop at nothing to see his dreams realized. But Nobunaga's vision needed more than just warriors who fought with sword and spear. He needed intelligence, insight into the movements of his enemies, and the ability to strike before they even knew he was coming. This is where the ninja came in. For all the power that Nobunaga wielded with his army, he knew that true control over Japan could not be achieved through brute force alone. It required stealth, subtlety, and, most of all, secrecy. And so, he turned to the shadows, the ninja. It was not long before Hanzō, now an accomplished and skilled young man in the art of ninjutsu, caught the attention of Oda Nobunaga. Hanzō had long been recognized as one of the most promising members of the Hattori clan, a ninja whose abilities were said to rival even the most seasoned samurai. His reputation as a master of infiltration and sabotage reached Nobunaga's ears, and soon enough an invitation arrived, one that would alter the course of Hanzō's life. When Hanzō first set foot in Nobunaga's camp, it was as if the world around him had shifted. Nobunaga's forces were unlike anything he had ever seen. Well-disciplined, fiercely loyal, and prepared for any challenge. The banners of Oda Nobunaga flapped in the wind, loud and proud, but it was the air of calculated ambition that gripped Hanzō's attention. This was not a simple warlord. This was a man with a vision that would transform Japan forever. Hanzō felt the weight of that ambition in the air, and he understood that, For better or worse, his path was now entwined with Nobunaga's. Upon joining Nobunaga's service, Hanzō was quickly put to work on some of the most sensitive and dangerous missions tasks that required the very best of his ninja training. His first assignments were focused on gathering intelligence, learning the movements of rival warlords, understanding the strategies of Nobunaga's enemies, and uncovering the hidden alliances that could threaten their progress. Unlike the samurai who fought in open battles, the ninja worked from the shadows. They infiltrated enemy camps, eavesdropped on their discussions, and, when necessary, sabotaged their resources to slow their advance. Hanzo's first mission was to infiltrate a rival warlord's camp under the cover of darkness. Disguised as a traveling merchant, he moved among the enemy's ranks, listening for whispers of rebellion or unrest. For days, he crept in and out of their camp, careful to leave no trace of his presence. He observed everything: the placement of soldiers, the flow of supplies, the moods of the generals, and learned to use that knowledge to his advantage. The success of this mission was a testament to Hanzo's skill, but also to the trust that Nobunaga placed in him. With that trust, Hanzō became more than just a tool of war. He became an integral part of Nobunaga's strategic vision, a silent hand that could shape the course of battles without ever being seen. Another key mission that Hanzō undertook involved the sabotage of a supply line that was crucial to the enemy forces. It was an act of calculated risk. He and a small team of trusted ninjas infiltrated the enemy's supply depot, setting fires to their provisions and crippling their ability to continue the war. In the dead of night, Hanzō moved like a shadow, his footsteps light and silent on the earth. The smell of burning wood and supplies filled the air, but Hanzō did not flinch. This was his world where shadows and silence were weapons as deadly as any sword. As Hanzō continued to rise through the ranks of Nobunaga's inner circle, the scale of the stakes became all too clear. Nobunaga was not simply fighting for power, he was fighting for control over Japan, and the forces that opposed him were numerous and ruthless. But, as Hanzō would soon learn, not all of Nobunaga's enemies wore the face of rivals. In 1582, just as Nobunaga's power seemed unstoppable, betrayal came from within his own ranks. The infamous betrayal at Honnoji, where Nobunaga's general, Akechi Mitsuhide, turned against him, shook the very foundations of the Oda clan. Nobunaga, surrounded and unable to escape, chose to take his own life rather than be captured by the enemy. It was a devastating blow, not only to Nobunaga's cause but to Hanzō, who had come to see the warlord as more than a leader. He had come to view him as a guide, a man whose vision had shaped his own path. For Hanzō, the death of Nobunaga was not just a personal loss. It was a test of his loyalty and his ability to navigate the world of shadows. In the aftermath of Nobunaga's death, Hanzō was tasked with ensuring the safety of those who remained loyal to his master's cause. It was in these critical moments, amidst the chaos and the shifting allegiances, that Hanzō's training in espionage, his understanding of loyalty, and his ability to act swiftly would be put to the ultimate test. Hanzō's time serving under Oda Nobunaga marked the beginning of a new chapter in his life. The skills he developed, the loyalty he learned to embody, and the unspoken bond he shared with his late master would guide him through the turbulent years that followed. While Nobunaga's death was a devastating blow, it set the stage for a new alliance with Tokugawa Ieyasu, the man who would eventually bring peace to Japan. Hanzō's journey from the shadows of Iga to the service of Oda Nobunaga had forged him into something more than a mere ninja. he had become a man capable of navigating the delicate balance between loyalty, duty, and survival. As the future of Japan hung in the balance, Hanzō would play a pivotal role in shaping that future, just as the shadows had shaped his destiny. The year was 1582, and Japan was teetering on the edge of a new era. Oda Nobunaga, a visionary and ruthless leader, had brought the country to the brink of unification. His ambition was vast, and his military innovations had reshaped the landscape of war in Japan. Under his command, alliances were forged and enemies crushed. But even as Nobunaga's power grew, there were those within his own ranks who plotted in the shadows, waiting for their moment to strike. It was a moment that came without warning. In the early days of June 1582, while Nobunaga was staying at the Honnoji Temple in Kyoto, his trusted general, Akechi Mitsuhide, turned against him. Akechi, once a loyal ally, had been harboring resentment towards Nobunaga for years. Perhaps it was the growing power of Nobunaga that threatened his own ambitions, or perhaps it was a personal betrayal. Whatever the reason, Mitsuhide's betrayal would change the course of history. At dawn, as the first rays of sunlight began to illuminate the temple grounds, Akechi's forces surrounded the building, cutting off any hope of escape. Within the temple, Nobunaga realized the gravity of the situation. His trusted general, the very man who had fought by his side in countless battles, had betrayed him. There was no chance for battle, no possibility of escape. Nobunaga, faced with certain death, chose to end his own life in a ritual seppuku, a final act of defiance against those who would see him fall. For Hanzō, the news of Nobunaga's death was like a thunderclap. He had served Nobunaga faithfully for years, carrying out his covert missions with precision, and in the process, developed a deep, unwavering loyalty to the warlord. To hear that the man who had been a guiding light for him, a mentor in both strategy and strength, was dead, betrayed by one of his own, shook him to his very core. The betrayal at Honnoji was not just a political upheaval. It was a personal blow to Hanzō. His entire world seemed to unravel. He had always believed that Nobunaga's dream of unifying Japan was just, that it was a cause worth dying for. But now, in an instant, that dream had been shattered. The man he had served loyally was dead, and the future of Japan was uncertain. In the hours following the betrayal, Hanzō wandered the forests of Iga in a daze, trying to make sense of the chaos that had erupted. The shadows, once his trusted allies, now seemed to mock him. His thoughts were conflicted, torn between his loyalty to Nobunaga and the harsh reality of the world he inhabited. As he sat by a quiet stream, the weight of his emotions began to break through. How could this happen? He whispered to himself. How could Akechi, of all people, betray Nobunaga? His mind replayed the many battles he had fought alongside Nobunaga's forces, the countless hours spent in the shadows gathering intelligence, sabotaging enemy plans, all for a single purpose: unification. But now that purpose seemed meaningless. Nobunaga was dead, and his dream had died with him. What now? Hanzō thought. What is my place in this fractured world? Suddenly, a voice broke through the silence. It was his father, Hattori Yasunaga, who had appeared out of the shadows, as he always did, calm and composed, despite the storm of emotions swirling in Hanzō's heart. You are lost in your thoughts, my son, Yasunaga said, his voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil that surely must have been on his mind as well. Hanzō turned to face him, his face a mixture of frustration and confusion. "Father, how can this be? How can we continue after this betrayal?" Yasunaga sat beside him, his eyes steady, his presence calming the storm within Hanzo's heart. "You are not the only one to suffer loss, Hanzo. We have seen betrayal before. We have seen our masters fall. But we, the shadows, are not bound by the whims of fate. We move, adapt, and survive." Hanzo's brow furrowed as he looked into his father's eyes. "But the dream, Nobunaga's dream, what happens to it now?" Yasunaga was silent for a moment before speaking softly, his words piercing the heavy silence. "The dream of one man does not bind us, Hanzo. We serve a cause, not a single person. And when one path is blocked, we find another. We will serve the one who takes up that cause. Whether it is Ieyasu or another, the duty of the Hattori remains unchanged. Loyalty is not about the man, it is about the purpose." Yasunaga's words hung in the air, heavy with truth. In the world of ninja, there were no lasting heroes, only causes to serve and shadows to hide within. The harsh reality of war was not one of glory, but of survival. And Hanzo, like every other warrior in this land, was a part of that brutal cycle. The land around them, once calm and serene, now seemed to reflect the turmoil of the heart. The peaceful stream rippled with the weight of his thoughts, and the forest that had been his training ground now seemed like a maze of uncertainty. The tranquil beauty of the surroundings was a stark contrast to the storm raging inside him. The suddenness of Nobunaga's fall was like a thunderstorm in the night, unexpected, violent, and devastating. As Hanzo sat beside his father, the echoes of the past battles came rushing back, the clang of swords, the cries of men on both sides of the conflict, the smell of smoke after a battle had ended. This was the brutal nature of the Sengoku period. There was no honor in war, only a ceaseless grind toward power. Betrayal was a constant shadow in the lives of those who fought for control, and in the blink of an eye, a trusted general could become the very instrument of a leader's downfall. Hanzo's decision. In the days that followed Nobunaga's death, Hanzo's thoughts were consumed by his sense of duty. He had served the cause of unification, had given everything to that vision. But now, with Nobunaga gone, the world had become a place of shifting alliances, dangerous betrayals, and an uncertain future. The old world was crumbling, and a new one was rising in its place. But despite the chaos, Hanzo knew one thing. His duty had not ended. The world may have been in turmoil, but his role was clear. He was a servant to the cause, not to the man. Loyalty, that was the lesson his father had taught him, and it was a lesson he would carry with him into the future. No matter who rose to power, Hanzo would remain a shadow, moving through the world, ensuring the survival of his people and the ideals for which he had fought. As he looked up into the darkened sky, Hanzo made his decision. "I will not let the cause die with Nobunaga," he whispered to himself. "I will serve the one who takes his place. Loyalty does not falter in the face of loss." Oh, the war for Japan was far from over, and Hanzo knew that his place in it was not defined by the fall of a single leader, but by the shadows he moved through, by the loyalty he carried within him, and by the duty that would see him through even the darkest of times. The Sengoku period was one of constant upheaval, where power shifted as swiftly as the tides. The death of Oda Nobunaga in 1582 sent shockwaves through Japan. His death, brought about by the betrayal of his general Akechi Mitsuhide, left a power vacuum in Japan, and the hope for unification seemed shattered. But from the ashes of this betrayal, a new force began to rise: Tokugawa Ieyasu, a man of exceptional patience, wisdom, and political acumen. Ieyasu had long served Nobunaga as a trusted ally, but he had bided his time, waiting for the right moment to seize control. After the death of Nobunaga, Ieyasu initially maintained his loyalty to Toyotomi Hideyoshi, Nobunaga's successor, aligning himself with the powerful warlord. However, as time passed, and Hideyoshi's rule faltered with his own death in 1598, Ieyasu saw the opportunity to claim the leadership that was rightfully his. Unlike Nobunaga, who had been a force of overwhelming strength and ambition, Ieyasu's method was one of gradual and steady consolidation of power. He knew that to control Japan, he would need both military might and the loyalty of the most trusted figures of the land. As the leader of the Tokugawa clan, Ieyasu's vision for the future was one of unity and peace, but he understood that such a future could only be secured by careful maneuvering, a delicate balance of power, and, above all, loyalty. It was in these early years of his rise that Hattori Hanzō, a master ninja from the Iga region, became an integral part of his plans. The world of espionage, intelligence, and covert operations that Hanzō was a part of would become crucial in securing Ieyasu's reign. Hanzo's path to Ieyasu was not a coincidence. While his reputation as a skilled ninja had spread far and wide, it was Ieyasu's keen sense of strategy and vision for a unified Japan that made him realize the value of Hanzo's talents. Ieyasu had seen the importance of covert operations during the ongoing wars and understood that his ability to control Japan would not be determined solely by military force. Espionage, intelligence gathering, and the ability to manipulate the shifting alliances of the Sengoku period were just as important as the sword. It was during a pivotal moment when Ieyasu was preparing to solidify his influence and control over eastern Japan that he reached out to Hanzō. At first, Hanzō was hesitant. Loyalty had been the cornerstone of his entire existence, and his service to Nobunaga had been built on a shared vision of unification. But with the death of his master, and with the instability that had followed, Hanzō understood that the future of Japan lay in the hands of those who could see beyond the chaos, those who could navigate the world of politics, strategy, and deception. When Ieyasu sent a messenger to Iga, seeking Hanzo's allegiance, Hanzō pondered the decision in solitude. He knew that Ieyasu's vision of a united Japan aligned with the loyalty and honor he had learned as a ninja of Iga. To serve Ieyasu was to serve a man who valued intelligence and strategy, a man who could bring order to a fractured land. The decision, however, was not made lightly. It was a commitment to the future, to the Tokugawa cause, and to a man who would become more than a master. He would become a symbol of the stability that Japan desperately needed. And so, Hanzō pledged his loyalty to Tokugawa Ieyasu, cementing his place as one of Ieyasu's most trusted retainers. It was a pivotal moment, not only for Hanzō but for the future of Japan. From that day forward, Hanzo's skills in espionage and his deep understanding of the shadowy world of ninja operations would become essential to Ieyasu's rise. Once Hanzō had pledged his allegiance to Ieyasu, he became an integral part of Tokugawa's strategies. His skills as a spy, saboteur, and strategist would help shape the Tokugawa clan's future. As Ieyasu began his consolidation of power, Hanzō was given key missions that would serve not only to protect Ieyasu's interests, but to outmaneuver the growing threats from rival factions. One of the first major roles Hanzō played was in the Battle of Komaki and Nagakute, 1584, a conflict between Ieyasu and the forces of Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Although the battle ended in a stalemate, it was Hanzō's intelligence gathering that ensured Ieyasu's army was prepared for every maneuver. Through a network of spies, Hanzō provided Ieyasu with critical information about enemy movements, supply lines, and weaknesses in the Toyotomi forces. By using the Iga ninja and other covert operatives, Hanzō helped ensure that Ieyasu's forces were always one step ahead. But it was not only military strategy that Hanzō excelled in. His ability to gather intelligence from within enemy ranks, to undermine rivals before they could strike, and to manipulate the battlefield with subtlety and precision was invaluable. In times of political tension, where alliances shifted as rapidly as the tides, Hanzō became a master of psychological warfare, turning potential enemies into allies and spreading disinformation when necessary to confuse and weaken Ieyasu's opponents. During the Battle of Sekigahara, 1600, Hanzō's contribution was pivotal in securing Ieyasu's victory. As the forces of Ieyasu clashed with those loyal to Ishida Mitsunari, it was Hanzō's intelligence network that provided critical insight into the enemy's movements. In the heat of battle, Hanzō, through his covert agents, ensured that no traitors from within Ieyasu's ranks would betray him at such a critical juncture. His actions behind the scenes, though invisible to most, were crucial in securing Ieyasu's triumph. The battle, which would mark the beginning of Tokugawa rule over Japan, was won not only with swords but with knowledge, and Hanzō was at the heart of it. The final consolidation of power came with the Tokugawa shogunate's establishment, and as Tokugawa Ieyasu ascended to the title of shogun, Hanzō found himself entrusted with the protection of the shogunate itself. His role evolved from a mere operative to a defender of the Tokugawa legacy, responsible for both the protection of Ieyasu and the stability of the newly formed regime. Ieyasu had always believed that the future of Japan would depend on more than just military strength. It would depend on the ability to control the unseen forces that could destabilize his rule. Through Hanzō's expertise, Tokugawa Ieyasu was able to navigate the treacherous political landscape and secure the future of the Tokugawa family for generations to come. Through his service to Ieyasu, Hanzō not only secured the future of Japan but solidified his place in its history. The loyalty he had pledged to Oda Nobunaga and Toyotomi Hideyoshi now shifted to the Tokugawa clan, but the principles that guided him remained unchanged. Loyalty, duty, and the unseen forces of espionage and intelligence remained his guiding light. By the end of his life, Hanzō had not only helped to build the foundation of the Tokugawa shogunate, but he had ensured the survival of his family, the Hattori clan, as well. His legacy lived on, not only as a ninja who had served the greatest men of his time, but as a symbol of the enduring power of loyalty and silence in a world defined by war, betrayal, and shifting allegiances. In the wake of Oda Nobunaga's death, the political landscape of Japan was thrown into turmoil. Nobunaga's ambition had been clear to unite Japan under his banner, but his sudden demise left a vacuum of power that threatened to undo all that he had accomplished. While Nobunaga's trusted retainer, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, had assumed leadership and sought to carry on his master's dream, the death of Hideyoshi in 1598 opened the floodgates for even more discord. Rival factions scrambled for power, and what had once been a unified cause splintered into a war for dominance. In the years following Hideyoshi's death, The Tokugawa clan, led by Tokugawa Ieyasu, began to rise. Ieyasu, who had long been an ally of Nobunaga and Hideyoshi, saw the opportunity to consolidate power and to fulfill the vision of a unified Japan that had been left behind by his fallen allies. But the road to power was fraught with challenges. Ieyasu faced fierce competition from Ishida Mitsunari, who had rallied forces to challenge Tokugawa's ambition. The stage was set for the decisive clash, the Battle of Sekigahara, a battle that would determine not only the future of Ieyasu's Tokugawa clan, but the fate of Japan itself. In the autumn of 1600, the opposing armies, those loyal to Ieyasu and those who supported Mitsunari, marched toward the fields of Sekigahara, a place that would soon become etched in history. The tension was palpable. Soldiers lined up for battle, the ground beneath them trembling with the anticipation of war. The outcome of this battle would shape the future of Japan, and Hanzō, now a seasoned ninja and trusted retainer of Ieyasu, knew that the fate of the Tokugawa clan and the stability of Japan rested upon the outcome of this single engagement. Hanzō's role in the Battle of Sekigahara was not one of direct combat. He was a man of shadows, not swords. His true value lay in his ability to influence events from behind the scenes, in the darkened corners of the battlefield. While Ieyasu's generals and samurai prepared for open conflict, it was Hanzō's duty to ensure the smooth flow of intelligence and to guarantee that the battle would not be decided by the unknown. He was tasked with securing the rear, maintaining the lines of communication, and ensuring that the Tokugawa forces were not blindsided by unexpected attack. One of the most critical elements of Hanzō's mission was preventing a possible betrayal from within the ranks of Ieyasu's own army. Throughout the night before the battle, Hanzō and his small team of elite ninja worked tirelessly, infiltrating the enemy camps and ensuring that no word of Ieyasu's movements would reach Mitsunari's forces. The air was thick with tension, the ground soaked with the scent of earth and sweat, as Hanzō crept silently among the shadows, aware that even the slightest mistake could cost them the war. On the eve of the battle, Hanzō was called into Ieyasu's war tent. The Tokugawa leader was pacing, his mind clearly heavy with the weight of what was to come. He turned to Hanzō as the ninja entered, his expression unreadable. "Hanzō," Ieyasu said, his voice low but steady. "Tomorrow, the fate of Japan will be decided. I trust you will ensure the safety of my men, and that no harm befalls the integrity of our forces." Hanzō bowed deeply. "It is my honor, my lord. I will not fail you." Ieyasu's eyes met his, and for the briefest of moments, there was an unspoken understanding between them. Ieyasu was not just the ruler of the Tokugawa clan, he was a man who understood the power of the shadows. And in those shadows, Hanzō thrived. The next day, the Battle of Sekigahara began. The clash of armies. The battle was brutal, a savage clash of steel and strategy. As the armies met on the fields, the sound of swords clashing and the roar of men filled the air. The battlefield was a maelstrom of chaos, where blood stained the earth and the cries of the fallen echoed into the horizon. But it was not only the strength of the samurai that would decide the outcome, it was the unseen hand, the manipulation of intelligence, and the ability to act without hesitation. Hanzō moved in the shadows, his mission clear: ensure that the Tokugawa forces remained strong and united, while keeping any surprises at bay. His most important task came when it became apparent that Mitsunari's forces were attempting to infiltrate Ieyasu's rear guard. A small group of Ieyasu's generals had defected to Mitsunari's cause, and their betrayal could change the course of the battle. Hanzō, ever the strategist, orchestrated a swift counterattack, ensuring that those who would turn on Ieyasu were dealt with quietly. No one would know the true extent of Hanzo's involvement in the victory, but the battle would be won, and Japan's future would be secured. By the end of the day, Sekigahara had been decisively won by Ieyasu's forces. The battlefield, once chaotic and filled with the sounds of war, fell silent as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, casting long shadows over the land. The bloodshed had been immense, and the toll on both sides was heavy, but the Tokugawa forces had emerged victorious. With this victory, Ieyasu's path to becoming the shogun of Japan was all but assured. The Tokugawa shogunate, which would bring over 2 centuries of peace and stability to Japan, was born in the fires of Sekigahara. Ieyasu had cemented his control over the nation, and his vision of a unified Japan could now be realized. For Hanzō, the victory was bittersweet. He had played his part. His role in securing Ieyasu's rear and preventing any sabotage was critical, but the price of that victory was high. He had seen comrades fall, soldiers sacrifice everything for a cause that seemed endless. And while the Tokugawa shogunate was a step toward peace, Hanzō knew that the cost of that peace was always high. As he stood in the aftermath of the battle, watching the wounded being tended to and the fallen being carried away, Hanzō couldn't help but reflect on the nature of war. The shadows that had served him so well in the past had now become the shadows of history. The war for Japan had been won, but the cost of that victory was a reminder that peace, when it came, was a fragile thing. Hanzō's duty, however, was clear. With the rise of the Tokugawa shogunate, his role as a servant of the shadows would continue. His loyalty was unwavering, and his life would be devoted to ensuring the stability of the new order, no matter the cost. The future of Japan had been decided, and the Tokugawa shogunate had emerged victorious. But for Hanzō, the battle within himself between loyalty and the unrelenting demands of duty would continue, hidden in the shadows as always. With the victory at the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600, Tokugawa Ieyasu had secured his place as the dominant power in Japan. His rise to shogunate marked the beginning of the Edo period, an era of peace, stability, and centralized rule that would last for over 250 years. The Sengoku period, which had been defined by constant war and chaos, was over, and the path to a unified Japan seemed assured. But for men like Hattori Hanzō, whose lives had been forged in the heat of battle and espionage, the arrival of peace did not necessarily mean the end of their work. For the ninja, peace brought its own challenges. An end to open warfare meant that the covert world of espionage, infiltration, and subterfuge would become less overt. But in this new world, there was still much to be done. As Tokugawa Ieyasu moved into the role of shogun, consolidating power, Hanzō found himself transitioning from the life of a battlefield operative to that of a protector of the Tokugawa dynasty. His service to Ieyasu was no longer about guiding the forces of war, but ensuring the future of his family, his clan, and the shogunate itself. After decades of bloodshed and conflict, peace in Japan was a welcome respite for most. The countryside, once scarred by the horrors of war, began to heal. Villages began to rebuild, and the roads that had once been filled with the sounds of marching armies were now quiet. The Tokugawa shogunate brought with it a sense of order and security, a time when samurai could lay down their swords and live in relative peace. But peace in a world so accustomed to war is never fully stable, and the shadows Hanzō had once relied on continued to demand his attention. Hanzō's life, too, began to shift. The man who had once spent his days as an unseen force in the shadows now had to navigate a different kind of landscape. Gone were the days of constant conflict, but the political intrigue, the dangerous alliances, and the hidden threats still remained. Though no longer at war, Hanzō's mind was still trained for conflict. The world had changed, but he had not. The techniques of espionage, the sharpness of his wit, and the loyalty he had learned to his master would now be applied in this new era of peace. After Sekigahara, Hanzō was given a new responsibility. He was appointed as the head of the Iga ninja under Tokugawa's service. His family, the Hattori clan, had long been the trusted protectors of Ieyasu, and now Hanzō was expected to continue that legacy. His role was no longer to engage in direct combat or sabotage behind enemy lines. Instead, he would focus on the protection and intelligence gathering that would help solidify Tokugawa's rule. Though the battlefield was no longer his domain, the world of espionage and surveillance was still vital. Hanzō's network of spies and informants was critical to maintaining the peace and ensuring that no rival factions could rise against the Tokugawa. He worked to root out any dissenters within the newly formed shogunate and to maintain a delicate balance of power between the ruling clans. The shadows were still very much a part of his world, but now, instead of sabotaging enemies on the battlefield, Hanzō worked within the political system to maintain stability and safeguard the Tokugawa family's power. While Hanzō thrived in this new role, the transition was not without its internal struggles. The man who had spent most of his life in the service of Oda Nobunaga and later Tokugawa Ieyasu had learned the true meaning of loyalty. Loyalty not just to the person, but to the cause. Yet, as peace settled over the land, Hanzō was left to confront the emptiness that came with a life of unwavering duty. One evening, after a long day of overseeing Tokugawa's intelligence network, Hanzō found himself alone in his private quarters, the weight of his thoughts pressing heavily upon him. The sense of duty that had once been so clear was now more ambiguous. His mind wandered back to the days of war, to the chaos of battle and the thrill of serving under his master, Ieyasu. But now, in this era of peace, he had to learn how to adapt, how to protect the dynasty without the constant urgency of conflict. What is my purpose now? Hanzō mused aloud to himself, looking out at the peaceful streets of Edo through the window of his chambers. His answer came quietly, almost as if the wind itself were whispering in his ear. It was his duty to the Tokugawa family and to Japan's future that still defined him. Though the methods had changed, his role remained the same: protector, servant, and shadow. Even in the time of peace, however, Hanzō knew that shadows still lingered. There were still those who sought to disrupt the stability of the Tokugawa shogunate, and as the head of Iga's ninja clan, it was his responsibility to ensure that such threats were neutralized before they could rise. It wasn't long before rumors began circulating about discontent brewing among certain factions, especially among the samurai who had served under Ieyasu, but felt slighted by his rise to power. Their loyalty to the Tokugawa was not as firm as Hanzō's, and whispers of rebellion began to spread. These were subtle threats, easily overlooked by the new generation of warriors who had never known the desperation of the Sengoku period. But for Hanzō, who had witnessed the brutality of the past, There was no room for complacency. Late one night, a trusted informant came to Hanzō with news of a plot some of Tokugawa's vassals were conspiring against him. It was a familiar feeling, one that Hanzō had known all too well in his younger days. But now, it was more dangerous than ever. The Tokugawa dynasty had only just secured its rule. It was fragile, and any challenge could undo years of hard-fought stability. Hanzō immediately set his network into motion, using every asset at his disposal: spies, covert operatives, and even his trusted ninja agents to uncover the extent of the conspiracy and eliminate any threat to the shogunate before it could take root. The world of shadows he had once served so deeply was now his world of defense, and he would not let the peace be broken by those who thought they could manipulate it. As Hanzō grew older, he began to reflect on the meaning of his life, on the cost of peace, and the sacrifices that had brought Japan to this point. In the early years of the Tokugawa shogunate, it seemed as though the land would finally find peace after so many years of war. But for men like Hanzō, who had lived through the Sengoku period, peace was never a simple thing. It was a fragile, fleeting moment that required constant vigilance and unyielding commitment. At times, Hanzō wondered if the life he had chosen, the life of shadows, of loyalty, and of endless duty, had any purpose beyond the protection of the Tokugawa family. But each time those thoughts arose, he would remind himself of his commitment to the land he had helped shape, to the future of Japan that he had fought for, and to the legacy he would leave behind. In the end, Hanzō's life after the war was not a life of ease. It was a life defined by service and sacrifice. The world he had known had changed, but the shadows still held sway. And as long as those shadows existed, Hanzō would remain their servant, ever watchful, ever loyal, guarding the future of Japan. The years had passed swiftly, and the peace brought by Tokugawa Ieyasu's rule seemed to stretch endlessly into the horizon. The once fragmented and chaotic land of Japan was now unified under the Tokugawa shogunate, ushering in a new era of stability. Yet, even in times of peace, the shadows that once defined Hattori Hanzō's life remained, and the ninja who had lived in those shadows knew that the world would always be a place of both light and darkness. By the time Hanzō had reached the twilight of his years, the world he had known had changed completely. No longer did he spend his days weaving through forests and fields, gathering intelligence or carrying out covert operations. The days of war were behind him, but the need for protection and loyalty remained. Now, his role was that of a mentor and a guardian, ensuring the continued strength of the Tokugawa shogunate and the Hattori clan. But even as the years had brought peace, they had also brought weariness. Hanzō's body, once a finely tuned instrument of stealth and precision, had begun to show the toll of his long years of service. His movements, once swift and graceful, had slowed. The sharpness of his mind, so often a weapon in the past, had started to dull. But even in his old age, Hanzō remained a figure of great respect, his legacy forever tied to the success of Tokugawa's reign and the protection of the shogunate. One evening, as the sunset bathed the land in a soft, amber glow, Hanzō sat in his chambers, looking out over the city of Edo. The bustling capital, once a quiet town, had become a grand symbol of the Tokugawa rule. The streets below were filled with people going about their daily lives, the sounds of their laughter and work drifting up to him. For a moment, Hanzō felt at peace. He had helped bring this peace to Japan. He had done his duty. And now his time was drawing to a close. On a quiet night in 1615, After a long life dedicated to service, Hattori Hanzō passed away. The cause was natural. The toll of age finally claiming the body of the man who had lived for decades in the shadows. He had seen the rise of the Tokugawa shogunate, the fall of his enemies, and the establishment of a lasting peace. But in his final moments, he was not a man of battle. Instead, he was a father, a mentor, and a protector, knowing that his life's work would live on in the generations to come. In his last hours, Hanzō called for his son, Hattori Masanari, to be by his side. Masanari, the eldest son of Hanzō, had been groomed for years to inherit his father's responsibilities, not just in terms of leadership of the Hattori clan, but in continuing the protection of the Tokugawa shogunate. His training had been just as rigorous as his father's, though it was focused on a world that was far less brutal and much more political than the one Hanzō had fought in. The world of samurai and ninja had evolved in the years since Tokugawa's ascension, and Masanari had been taught to navigate this new world with the same skills that his father had honed. On the night of his passing, Hanzō, in his final moments, spoke to his son with quiet wisdom, reminding him of the values that had defined his own life. "The shadows are not our enemy, my son," Hanzō said, his voice faint but clear. "It is within the shadows that we find our greatest strength. Loyalty, duty, and the will to protect those who cannot protect themselves, these are the true marks of a ninja. Carry our family's name with honor, and remember, peace does not last forever, but we, the Hattori, will always remain vigilant." With those final words, Hattori Hanzō passed away peacefully in his sleep, leaving behind a legacy of loyalty, courage, and unflinching service to the Tokugawa shogunate. His death was met with a mixture of mourning and reverence, as he had been a man whose very name was synonymous with both strength and secrecy. The Iga ninja, under his command, had become legends in their own right, and his passing marked the end of an era for the Tokugawa era. The mantle of leadership passed to Hattori Masanari, Hanzō's eldest son, who would continue to serve the Tokugawa shogunate as the head of the Hattori clan. Though the nature of warfare had changed, the need for vigilance remained. Masanari, like his father, was steeped in the art of espionage, though his work would be far more focused on intelligence gathering, political maneuvering, and ensuring that the Tokugawa family's rule remained unchallenged. Masanari, though not as deeply entrenched in the shadowy world his father had navigated, was no less capable. He had been trained in the same rigorous traditions as Hanzō, but now his role would require him to adapt those skills to a new era, one where the enemy was not always an army on the battlefield, but could be a rival samurai, a discontented lord, or even an internal threat to Tokugawa rule. Masanari honored his father's legacy, ensuring that the Hattori clan remained as loyal and indispensable to the Tokugawa shogunate as it had been during his father's time. The Iga ninja remained a powerful force, guarding not only the physical safety of the Tokugawa family, but also protecting their political power through intelligence, subterfuge, and careful strategy. However, as Masanari took up the mantle, he often reflected on his father's words about the shadow. He understood that his time as a ninja leader was not about glory or fame, but about quiet service, ensuring that the Tokugawa dynasty remained stable. He was not to stand on a battlefield with a blade raised, but to work in the shadows where his father had lived, understanding that true power was often wielded from behind the scenes. Though Hattori Hanzō had passed, his influence remained deeply rooted in the fabric of the Tokugawa shogunate. The ninja who had served Nobunaga, Ieyasu, and the Tokugawa cause would live on through his son, and through the Hattori clan as a whole. Hanzo's life was one of secrecy, sacrifice, and unwavering loyalty. His story was not written in the annals of battlefields or sung in the ballads of samurai, but it was written in the quiet work done in the shadows, where the fate of the nation often hung in the balance. His son, Hattori Masanari, would carry the torch forward, maintaining the legacy of the Hattori clan and ensuring that the Tokugawa shogunate would continue to thrive in an ever-changing world. In the end, Hanzo's legacy was not just one of loyalty to a master, but a deeper, more enduring loyalty to Japan itself, its future, its peace, and its power. The life of Hattori Hanzō was one shaped by shadows, loyalty, and an unwavering commitment to the unity of Japan. From his early years in the Iga region, where he was trained in the deadly arts of espionage and subterfuge, to his pivotal role in the rise of the Tokugawa shogunate, Hanzō became an emblem of silent strength. His legacy was not built on the battlefield, but in the quiet spaces where strategy, intelligence, and loyalty converged. Hanzo's service to Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and finally Tokugawa Ieyasu was a testament to his ability to adapt to the shifting tides of power. He understood the nature of war, how the course of history was often determined not by the clash of swords, but by the unseen forces of espionage and manipulation. He fought not with the strength of his arm, but with the sharpness of his mind and the stealth of his movement. Through every trial, every betrayal, and every victory, Hanzo's loyalty to the greater cause never wavered. With the death of Nobunaga and the subsequent rise of Ieyasu, Hanzō found a new purpose, ensuring the future of a unified Japan under the Tokugawa shogunate. His intelligence, strategic mind, and mastery of the shadows were crucial in shaping the path that led to Tokugawa rule. Though his role in the Battle of Sekigahara and his covert operations often went unnoticed by history, they were key in ensuring Ieyasu's victory and the establishment of the Tokugawa dynasty. As peace settled over the land, Hanzo's life entered a new chapter. No longer a soldier of war, he became a guardian of the Tokugawa shogunate, a protector not just of Ieyasu's life, but of the very stability that had brought peace to Japan. His transition from a warrior to a mentor and protector was seamless. It was the next step in a life devoted to service. Yet, even in times of peace, Hanzō remained vigilant, knowing that the shadows were never far behind, and that the world he had fought to build would always require careful tending. When Hattori Hanzō passed away in 1615, it was not just the death of a man, but the end of an era. His son, Hattori Masanari, inherited not just the role of head of the Hattori clan, but the weight of a legacy that stretched back through the shadows of history. Masanari would continue his father's work, navigating the delicate balance between loyalty, duty, and the shifting political landscape of the Tokugawa shogunate. While the world around him had changed from one of war to one of peace, the shadowy work that Hanzō had perfected would continue to play a crucial role in maintaining the stability of the new era. In the grand tapestry of Japan's history, Hattori Hanzō remains a figure whose legacy is immortalized not by tales of glory or conquest, but by his mastery of the unseen, his loyalty to a cause greater than himself, and his unyielding commitment to the protection of the Tokugawa shogunate. He was a man who moved through the shadows, shaping the course of history in ways that were often invisible, but always vital. The peace that he helped secure would endure, but the shadow of his influence would never fade. In the end, Hattori Hanzō's story is not just one of personal sacrifice, but of the profound and lasting impact one individual can have on the fate of a nation. His was a life defined by service not for glory, but for something much greater, the protection of a vision. The vision of a unified Japan, free from the chaos of constant war, a vision realized under the rule of the Tokugawa shogunate. Hanzō's work, carried out in the shadows, was a quiet force that helped to stabilize a fractured nation, ensuring that Japan could finally emerge from the darkness of the Sengoku period and begin a new chapter in its history. He was a man who understood the true cost of peace, not just the sacrifice of life, but the vigilance and the quiet work necessary to secure it. While his name may not be as widely known in the public records of history, the legacy of the Hattori clan and of Hattori Hanzō lives on, not in tales of loud, glorious battles or public conquests, but in the small, unnoticed efforts that sustained the fragile peace of Tokugawa Japan. His influence continued long after his passing, woven into the fabric of the shogunate's stability. Through Hanzō's network of spies, his surveillance tactics, and his keen strategic mind, the Tokugawa shogunate remained unchallenged for centuries. He had shaped the future not with sword and shield, but with a subtle hand that controlled the unseen forces of power, intelligence, loyalty, and strategy. The Hattori clan, once known for its deadly skill in warfare, transitioned into an institution of loyalty, service, and quiet protection. As Hanzō's son, Hattori Masanari, took up the mantle, the essence of his father's legacy remained. Masanari's leadership in the Tokugawa period marked a shift in the clan's role. From the shadowy operatives of war to the guardians of peace and stability. But the true weight of their service remained in the unspoken, the unseen watch over the shogunate's interests, the subtle negotiations, and the invisible hand that shaped history. The role of the Hattori clan became not just about physical protection, but about maintaining the integrity and loyalty that held the Tokugawa rule together. As time moved on, the ninja, the shadow warriors that had once shaped the course of battle, began to fade from the public eye. The world of espionage and covert operations grew quieter as Japan's peace settled into a long period of stability. However, the essence of what Hanzō and his clan had fought for lived on. Their legacy was not just in their role as ninja or spies, but in their ability to adapt to evolve from warriors of war into defenders of peace. The very idea of loyalty, that Hanzō championed loyalty to the cause, to the land, and to the family, continued to serve as a guiding principle for those who followed in his footsteps. Even in the Edo period, which saw Japan flourish in cultural and political peace, the silent shadows of those who came before remained a subtle yet crucial part of the machinery of the Tokugawa government. The ideals of honor, duty, and sacrifice that Hanzō exemplified carried through to the next generations of Hattori clan members. They continued to serve as protectors not of a warlord, but of a country that had finally found its way out of the dark chaos of constant battle. Hanzō's life was never meant to be one of public recognition or fame. He was a man who worked quietly in the shadows, with no need for acknowledgement, knowing that his efforts were far more valuable in silence. And it was in this silence that his true legacy lies, an enduring legacy of selfless loyalty, strategic brilliance, and an unwavering commitment to the peace he helped establish. Hanzō's influence is woven into the very fabric of Japan's stability, unseen but never absent, continuing through the lives of his descendants and through the ongoing efforts of those who understood the true power of loyalty and duty. In the end, the most profound and lasting impact of Hattori Hanzō was not in what he achieved for himself, but in what he achieved for Japan, a nation that, though fraught with turmoil, could rest in the knowledge that the work of those like him would endure, ensuring that peace would be maintained, quietly and steadfastly, for generations to come. Hanzo's shadow, a symbol of protection, of vigilance, and of quiet strength, remained cast over the future, a constant reminder that true power lies not in visible force, but in the unseen work done for the greater good.